World War II wasn't only fought with bullets and bombs. Behind every battle, from the burning skies of London to the frozen steppes of Russia, there was another war. Quiet, invisible, fought with money, credit, and trust. Tanks roared, cities crumbled, but in vaults, banks, and factories, the fate of nations was being decided. Germany financed its lightning victories through plunder, looting gold, art, and grain from conquered lands. Britain, bankrupt but unbroken, begged the world for loans, selling tomorrow to survive today. And across the ocean, America waited, its factories silent, its treasury overflowing, ready to become the arsenal that would turn the tide. This is the untold story of how war was paid for, how treasuries bled, how ordinary citizens bought bullets with their savings, and how money became as decisive as any general. This is the war of fire and funding, the hidden front of World War II. World War II began not just with roaring tanks, but with emptying treasuries. Blitzkrieg rolled across Poland and France in weeks, leaving the world stunned. Yet behind every panzer charge was a desperate calculation. Who would pay? Hitler's regime thrived on looted gold and stolen resources, financing war with plunder while civilians across Europe quietly starved to keep the machine alive. Nazi accountants followed the soldiers. Banks were emptied, factories seized, reserves stolen. A city could fall in days, but its wealth was stripped in hours. Families watched food vanish, wages collapse, while the Reich turned stolen economies into weapons. Each victory was less about military genius, more about robbery on a continental scale, masked by banners and parades. For the Wehrmacht, conquest became currency. Every bullet fired had to be replaced, every tank fueled. Lightning war was fast, but lightning burns out quickly. Hitler's armies needed new territory, not just for strategy, but to pay debts from the last invasion. It was war chained to theft, a cycle that demanded endless victories or sudden collapse. Meanwhile, Britain faced a different nightmare. Alone after France fell, the island was battered nightly by the Blitz. Fires burned over London, yet the greater fear lay in the vaults. The treasury was running dry. Britain had courage in abundance, but courage could not buy fuel, aircraft, or food. Without money, defiance would crumble into silence. The Bank of England sent gold across the Atlantic, guarded convoys risking U-boat attacks. Imagine crates of bullion glinting in the dark, slipping through torpedo-filled waters. Each bar of gold was more than treasure. It was survival itself. That gold bought planes, bombs, and bread, the lifeline of a nation fighting with its back against the sea. Yet even with bullion gone, Britain's costs climbed. By 1941, the empire teetered on bankruptcy. Posters urged citizens to buy war bonds, telling families their shillings could buy bullets. Housewives and workers lined up to lend their meager savings. It wasn't charity, it was desperation, a nation clawing for time by selling tomorrow, to pay for today. Across the ocean, Roosevelt faced pressure. America was not yet at war, but the White House understood. If Britain fell, Hitler would dominate Europe. Roosevelt framed a bold plan: Lend-Lease. Instead of demanding cash, the US would provide weapons, ships, food now, payment later. It was credit extended with faith that survival itself was worth the risk. As Britain borrowed, Germany bled, occupied nations dry. France paid billions in occupation costs, its industries forced to churn out tools of war for Berlin, bread, coal, fuel. Every necessity vanished into German hands. Civilians lived with rations while Wehrmacht tanks kept moving. Occupation was not just rule by soldiers, but by invoices stamped with Reich insignias. In Poland and Holland, the theft was harsher. Farmers saw grain seized, families forced into labor, wages worthless under Nazi taxes. The battlefield stretched into homes and barns. Hitler's empire wasn't built only with tanks, but by draining life from conquered lands. Every panzer victory was paid by a hungry child somewhere in occupied Europe. But theft could not hide growing cracks. The Reich burned fuel faster than it could steal it. Ammunition vanished in weeks. Vehicles broke without spare parts. Blitzkrieg, once invincible, became a monster starving on its own victories. Even Hitler's rage could not refill oil drums or conjure coal. The war's foundation, plunder, was unsustainable, a ticking time bomb. Churchill understood money as much as strategy. His speeches rallied hearts, but his letters begged for dollars. "Give us the tools," he thundered, "and we will finish the job." It was both promise and plea, an island nation trying to mask its financial fragility with thunderous courage, praying America would believe before it was too late. Ordinary Britons played their part. Children lined up to hand coins for war bonds. Workers saved pay packets. Women gave jewelry. Each poster claimed, "Your savings are bullets for the front." The Blitz destroyed houses, but not resolve. In shelters, families clutched bond certificates as if paper could shield them from falling bombs. Perhaps, in spirit, it did. Contrast this with German methods. Where Britain begged, Germany stole. Where London held rallies, Berlin held auctions of stolen art and treasure. Each tank rolling east was funded by a masterpiece ripped from a Paris gallery or a chest emptied in Warsaw. The Reich financed war by turning beauty into bullets, culture into cold steel. By 1941, Hitler looked east for his next payment. The Soviet Union promised oil, wheat, and vast resources. Barbarossa wasn't only ideology, it was economic hunger. Germany invaded not just to destroy communism, but to rob the land itself. Hitler bet that Soviet riches would pay for total victory, ignoring the cost in blood and winter. Yet conquest brought diminishing returns. The Red Army fought harder than expected. Supplies stretched thin. Winters froze fuel in barrels. Soldiers wrote home of hunger, thin boots, and broken rifles. Plunder could not keep up with the pace of war. For the first time, Germany's economic engines sputtered, and its armies paid the price in frost and failure. Britain's survival, meanwhile, hinged on America's gamble. Lend-Lease shipments, tanks, aircraft, food, crossed the ocean under constant threat of U-boats. Each convoy was a coin toss, survival or sinking. Sailors prayed as depth charges thundered. Every crate that reached British shores wasn't just steel, it was hope in wooden boxes, a promise the fight would go on. In occupied Europe, resentment grew. Civilians whispered, "This is not war, it's robbery." Factories turned against the Reich, sabotage spread. The more Germany stole, the more resistance it sparked. Hitler's economy was feeding itself poison, anger, defiance, rebellion. Money taken at gunpoint always carries a debt, and soon Europe would demand repayment in blood. By late 1941, the war's financial map was clear. Germany's empire of plunder stretched wide but hollow. Britain stood defiant but broke. And America waited, the only power rich enough to decide the war's fate. Tanks mattered, planes mattered, but above all, money mattered. And it was money that would decide who endured. Even Hitler, master of theatrics, feared his balance sheets. He raged at generals, but he raged more at shortages. Blitzkrieg was an illusion of affordability. Without the next conquest, the whole machine risked stalling. Victories paid bills, but a defeat could bankrupt the Reich, militarily and financially. Stalingrad would prove just how brittle that system was. Thus, fire and funding defined the early war. Cities burned, treasuries bled. Britain pawned its future for survival, while Germany robbed its neighbors to buy another month of war. Two models, both fragile, waiting for America to intervene. For behind every explosion lay an invoice, and behind every victory lay the shadow of debt. Pearl Harbor's flames jolted America awake. The isolationist dream died in a single morning of smoke and sirens. Yet even as battleships burned, Roosevelt's eyes weren't only on the Pacific. He saw the war as an industrial contest, a test of who could outbuild and outspend the enemy. Factories that once made cars and radios were seized by urgency. Detroit became the arsenal of democracy, assembly lines clanging with tank hulls and bomber fuselages. America discovered that steel and oil were more powerful than slogans, and industry became the new battlefield. Posters covered city walls. Buy war bonds. Smiling soldiers pointed from the paper, asking every citizen to invest. It wasn't abstract finance, it was survival. A single bond meant bullets for Marines, fuel for aircraft, rations for sailors bracing in the Pacific. Children brought coins, farmers sold livestock, women gave jewelry. In school gyms and town halls, auctions rang with patriotic songs. Each dollar signed was not just money, it was a promise that their sons would come home. Hollywood joined the fight. Stars like Carole Lombard and Rita Hayworth toured bond rallies, urging audiences to fight with your wallet. Glamour met sacrifice. The silver screen transformed into a weapon sharper than propaganda leaflets. The transformation was staggering. By 1943, over 85 million Americans owned war bonds. Nearly every family had invested. It was the largest act of collective financing in human history, binding a nation of strangers into one war chest. While citizens bought bonds, Washington pushed production. The Liberty Ship program launched vessels faster than U-boats could sink them. Welders worked day and night, sparks flying under blackout lights. America wasn't just defending itself, it was building a flood. Every week, new tanks rolled off lines, jeeps lined train yards, and aircraft soared from hangars. The numbers stunned even generals. Thousands of planes each month, factories outproducing entire continents. Hitler mocked America as soft. Soon, steel would prove him wrong. And then came the Lend-Lease lifeline. Crates marked USA arrived in Britain's ports, filled with food, trucks, radios. In frozen Murmansk, Soviet soldiers unloaded American boots, canned meat, and Studebaker trucks. Allied armies marched on American rubber and oil. But the convoy lifeline was perilous. German U-boats prowled the Atlantic, turning merchant ships into fireballs. Sailors stood watch with frozen breath, knowing each crossing was a coin toss. War bonds weren't just papers, they were ships fighting for survival. In the Pacific, the arsenal powered island hopping. Aircraft carriers stocked with American planes darkened horizons. War bonds became Hellcats, Corsairs and B-29s, sweeping over coral reefs and volcanic ash, grinding the Japanese empire backward. At home, rationing reminded families of the stakes. Gasoline coupons, sugar stamps, blackout curtains. The nation lived lean, but no one doubted the trade. Small sacrifices at home, victory abroad. Every empty shelf was a bullet shipped across the sea. Roosevelt's fireside chats framed it clearly. This was not just a war of soldiers, but of producers and payers. "We must be the great arsenal of democracy," he declared, his voice crackling through radios, steadying a people with both fear and faith. Factories became cathedrals of sound. Hammers, welders, the rhythm of industry. Women filled positions once denied them, Rosie the riveter flexing her arm. For every gun carried abroad, a woman's hand had set its rivet or forged its casing. The numbers dwarfed history. America built over 300,000 aircraft, 88,000 tanks, and millions of rifles. It wasn't just output, it was momentum. Wars are marathons, and America's factories had endless breath. Even Germany's high command admitted the US industrial tide was unstoppable. Reports noted grimly, enemy equipment seems endless. On every front, Axis soldiers faced not just armies, but an assembly line that never slept. Bond drives, pushed harder, with parades of captured weapons rolled through American streets. Citizens touched dented helmets, broken rifles, symbols of a war their money was turning. The enemy was real, and so was their role in beating him. By 1944, American dollars echoed in Normandy's surf. Higgins boats launched, Sherman tanks rumbled ashore. Each landing craft had its roots in a loan from a farmer, a coin from a child, a bond signed in a small town bank. Victory was not bought cheaply. Blood was spilled, cities destroyed, but the arsenal never faltered. While others grew weaker, America grew stronger, its economy booming even in war. Money became steel, steel became victory. The arsenal of democracy was more than factories or finance. It was unity, citizens, leaders, workers, and soldiers stitched together by bonds, both financial and human. America had awakened, and its roar would echo until the war's end. The battlefields of World War II are remembered for fire and blood. But behind every explosion lay a ledger, behind every victory, an invoice. Germany gambled on theft, Britain pawned its future, and America turned savings and steel into a tidal wave. It was not only courage that won the war, it was credit, sacrifice, and the unseen hands of millions. Families who gave their last coins, workers who forged through sleepless nights, leaders who bet their nations on loans and promises. By the war's end, cities were in ruins, but the lesson was clear. Wars are not just fought by soldiers, but by societies willing to pay the price. Fire may win battles, but funding wins wars. This was the hidden front of World War II, not the clash of armies, but the clash of economies, and it proved that the strongest weapon of all is the will of a people to endure.